Welcome back to the channel in Season 5 of the VDL. I'm joined here today by Tom, and we're very excited to be bringing you the power rankings for the Victini division. Before we get into that though, please remember that this is our opinion, so please do not take it personally on how your team is ranked. We're essentially looking at these teams in a vacuum since we're not judging a team based on how skilled the coach is. Finally, if you enjoy, please drop a like and consider subscribing, as this video took a ton of effort to make in such a short amount of time. Let's get started with our first pick overall, Red Sox Alex. Returning to the Victini division for a second season in a row, we have Red Sox Alex. They drafted a balanced team featuring Palafin, Scizor, and Mega Garchomp, supported by some defensive monsters in Tangrowth and Florges. All of these Pokemon synergize quite well together, covering each other's weaknesses, but a major flaw we noticed was nothing is faster than base 100. There is web support from Ariados, but there are other Pokemon that would much rather take up that slot on this team. Dropping one of the 3 steel types, most likely Bisharp, in favor of a faster option could really benefit the team. One other change we would recommend is putting Terra Fighting on the Bastiodon over Dragon, but those few changes would make this team quite threatening.
Next up is Bree, who has a very solid team. Bree drafted Great Tusk round 1 and her following picks support it really well. Bree drafted Kleavor, who is the best rock setter in the game, and Alomomola, who will be able to provide Great Tusk with Wish support. This team is a great mix of offense and defense, with only a slight issue of being a little ground weak, considering the grass type is part poison. I really like the Terra Captain options here. Terra Tauros is very underrated. Terra Normal Sheer Force boosted body slams are extremely tough to switch into, and Tauros has the coverage to hit both Ghost and Steel types. Overall, this is a really great team.
The Shaman champion for Season 4, Tataz, has moved up to Victini and has quite the bulky offense team. In a vacuum, this team is very slow, but when looking at just how bulky it is, speed is not really a factor that's going to matter. Arboliva provides grassy terrain support to Melmetal and Pecharunt to weaken earthquakes and giving them passive recovery to make the team even more resilient. 2 small changes that I would make to this team would be first, getting a Wish Passer, as mons like Primarina, Melmetal, and Mudsdale would really appreciate it. Second would be another Hazard Clearer, preferably one that isn't weak to Stealth Rocks. With these few small changes, we think this team could be almost impossible to break through.
Plays for Days is next, and he drafted Annihilate round 1 and supported it extremely well with his next 2 picks being Iron Treads and Hisuian Samurott. This trio synergized really well together, in such that Samurott is the best spike setter in the game, and Annihilate is probably the second best spin blocker, since it can also make your opposition think twice clicking Defog, as they may give Annihilate a Defiant boost. Tread supports these guys really well by being a reliable spinner, and these 3 cover almost all of each other's weaknesses. Plays then finished his team by drafting a lot of offensive threats in Thunderous Therian and Hisuian Arcanine, and he then supported this offense with Grimmsnarl, giving his team screen support. This team is a great team, and I can see it performing really well.
Another slow team was drafted by Grot, who is making their VDL debut this season. This was a very hard one for us to rank because this is a super offensive team, but as previously mentioned, it has a speed issue. Featuring Chi-Yu to threaten on the special side and Galarian Darmanitan for the physical side, there isn't much that's easily going to swap in. The downside is that they are both not the fastest, but this is supplemented by webs provided by Rabambi. Alas though, all of these Pokemon are weak to Stealth Rocks, and this team has no Rapid Spin users, meaning if you want to remove hazards, you must also remove your webs. This team could use a few changes, mainly just getting better hazard control.
Lucy drafted a really nice balanced team. Lucy started her draft off strong with fast offensive threats in Darkrai and Mega Diancie, with Diancie also being a good support option. Donphan will need to carry this team, being the only reliable source of removal. However, Diancie's magic bounce may make the opposition think twice about setting hazards. Lucy also has some incredible bulk with Hisuian Guja, Suicune and Cresselia, who are all very annoying mons to break and can also set up and just sit on the field all game. Similarly, Blaziken can also spiral out of control as a setup sweeper for this team. Lucy has strong Terra Caps in Electrode and Braviary. Similarly to Tauros, I think Braviary is also a very underrated Terra Captain and can be extremely powerful. The only recommendation I would provide for this team is I think Wugtrio should be swapped for a Grass type to patch up the ground weakness. Wugtrio doesn't really provide a whole lot to this team, and there are actually some very decent Grass types available for 2 points, such as Meganium. Overall, this is a really great team.
Another coach moving up from the Shaman division, we have Zethus rocking a powerful Volt Turn balance team. Tapu Lele is a great start, being a fierce special threat with its strong offensive typing, boosted by Psychic Terrain. To take further advantage of the terrain, we see Zethus grab Frail Demons in Mega Beedrill, Hoopa, and Ogerpon Cornerstone to ignore priority moves from would-be revenge killers. To further support Mega Beedrill, there are two very reliable defog users in Zapdos and Empoleon, the latter of which is also able to set Stealth Rocks of its own. This is a great team that we don't see anything needing changed.
Looking at Absy's team at first, I didn't like it. However, looking deeper into it, I can see this team being very annoying for the opposition. This team is essentially all sorts of bulk plus Iron Valiant, and I think it could work really well. He has great defensive pivots in Vaporeon and Uxie that can just tank and get Val in safely, as well as providing wish support to Val or other defensive pieces like Terra Colossal, Clodsire, or Skarmory. Zeraora and Hydreigon also round this team out quite nicely. Considering their wide move pools, they will always be able to support an offensive role that Iron Valiant might not necessarily want to take on. The biggest hindrance to this team, however, is considering the amount of hazards on this team, it would benefit from more rapid spin and less defog. If Colossal dies or doesn't come, a lot of potential hazard could be wasted. Something like Serena would fit this team nicely, as well as a ghost type that's not Terra Colossal to spin block. I think this team is on the right track, just needs a few changes.
Going out into the rain for this next team drafted by Carp Cranium. The first 5 Pokemon are fantastic rain abusers, with Archaludon to fire off one-turn Electro Shots, Mega Swampert to sweep with its rain-boosted water moves, and Regieleki to nuke non-resists with Thunder. After this point though, a lot of the members of this team begin to repeat the purpose of another Pokemon. Like Gyarados, for example, is undoubtedly a worse sweeper than Mega Swampert due to its reliance on setting up to patch its speed stat. Another major flaw we noticed is besides Haunter, which is quite frail, there is no true fairy resist on this team, since both Archaludon and Dragalge are part Dragon type. This team is definitely carried by the fact that it is a rain team, but it could definitely use some work to be better.
Next up is lack of interest with the mono-normal type team. It is hard to rate this team considering it is following mono-normal, so looking at it from that standpoint, it's actually pretty solid. Aside from obvious flaws, the biggest issue with this team is removal. Mega Pidgeot is the only form of removal here, and if you want to use Mega Lopunny, you have to either not have removal at all, or bring Mega Pidgeot that has to hold the Mega Stone, so we'll always be taking rock damage before being able to defog. Picking up Komala would greatly benefit this team. It's definitely going to be fun to see your matches, and I think this team is great considering what it is.
Next up we have Tomo finally making his way over to the VDL and drafting quite an unorthodox team. We see all 4 different types of weather setting abilities on this team with Megazard Y, Gigalith, Alolan Ninetales, and Politoed. The rest of this team is centered around Pokemon to abuse these said weathers, like Walking Wake, Excadrill, and Venusaur. Now, while this team might be an absolute nightmare for your opponents to prep for, we don't think in practice it's going to work all that well, considering there is just so much to balance by having all of these weather types. We would be happy to see you prove us wrong, as this is a really cool team. We just think going for 2 types of weather would have worked a lot better.
Ray Cubos is next with the grassy terrain and sand team. I think this team is a great implication of using multiple gimmicks, since they both can be utilized together or by themselves. Ray started his draft off with the Sneasel Rillaboom combo, which is always threatening in draft. Ray also has some great defensive pieces in Celesteela, Hatterene, and Gastrodon, and a strong sand core in Tyranitar, Terra Houndstone, and Dracozolt. One downside to this team, however, is the hazard removal is pretty poor. Sigilyph and Driftblim being the only way to clear hazards isn't the most reliable since they are both flying types. This team would also appreciate some more pivoting to get a strong offense on the field. Overall, a really cool team, however, it needs a few changes.
Typhon is looking to redeem themselves this season in Victini, with Tapu Koko leading the charge. Right behind is Iron Moth to take advantage of the electric terrain set by Koko, but oddly enough, that is the last Quark Drive Pokemon on this team. Tapu Koko is one of the most expensive Pokemon on the board, so we feel like you should be taking more advantage of it. Only other complaint with this team was the defog users it has. Aerodactyl will never run the move since it would take 25% on switch in, and Koko and Rotom aren't bad options, but definitely don't want to run it every single week. This team has some really solid speed tiers with good power, but we just think a few changes need to be made, mainly grabbing a second terrain abuser.
Jiao Ruben has what we believe to be the best team in this division. Jiao drafted incredible offense in Mega Gallade and Roaring Moon, and some very reliable defense in Corviknight, Galarian Weezing, and Probopass. The remaining Pokemon on this team all can either come as either offensive, bulky offensive, or defensive pieces, with Pokemon like Meloetta and Volcanion being extremely versatile. Jiao has a strong defensive Terra Captain in Probopass, and Rotom Frost is also a great Terra Captain, since Terra Ice will allow it not to need to rely on Blizzard hitting for some nice Bolt Beam coverage. Overall, this is a really great team and will be extremely threatening for the opposition.
Our second to last pick belongs to Circle Button, who's rocking a balanced team that is definitely leaning towards the offense. The biggest flaw that we quickly noticed in this team is that it is very weak to fairy types, with only Togedemaru and Magmortar quote-unquote resisting, since they're generally not considered bulky Pokemon. This team does have very good hazard options, with Garchomp being able to set them up effortlessly. Now, having both Garchomp and Dragapult on the same team is an interesting choice, as a bulky water type, better steel type, or even a grounded poison type could benefit this team, but you do have Silvally to fill any holes this team may have. We just think this team needs some work, but we would be happy to be proven wrong.
Last but not least is Joe Mama. Joe drafted Goldango and then supported it really well by grabbing Gliscor and Nex. These two can really reliably set up hazards and then block the opposition from removing them, and Joe also has a very reliable spinner himself in Cyclizar. Joe then grabbed a second Regenerator Pokemon and a great defensive pivot in Slowking, and grabbed Weavile, an incredibly offensive Ice typing that really appreciates the defense boost given from Slowking. This team synergizes super well together and is definitely one to rival the top teams. Only noticeable flaw in this team is no grounded poison outside of Terra Orthworm to absorb T-Spikes for Pokemon like Comfey and Slowking. However, it isn't as problematic for this team as it typically would be. This team is definitely a stronger team and will be going in the great team tier.
Those are your teams for VDL Season 5. Let us know down in the comments which is your favorite and what your thoughts are on the rankings. We're curious to see yours, and I want to give a huge thank you to Tom for joining me today and helping out with the script.
No worries, happy to be here, and I look forward to seeing all the matches this season. Thank you.
That's about all I got for you guys. Once again, if you enjoyed, drop a like and subscribe. Peace.